All right, so hi. Hi, this is Gayle again from BERNINA of Naperville, and I'm presenting to you our part two of our BERNINA software building blocks for October of 2025. So now we watched a video on all of the cool things that you can do with couching and that sort of thing. And now in part two, we're going to focus on how you can make faux fur fabric. Can you believe it? All right, well, let's go over to the computer and watch this lesson together.
Hi, this is Gail with Bernina of Naperville, and welcome to our Zoom session of our boucle bunny or bear. So, what are you going to learn in this class? Well, we're going to learn how to make a super cute boucle bunny. And it's done all in embroidery, and we're using a design from Lead Studio. All right. So, here is my little fur bunny that I created. And, you'll probably, since you have software, which is awesome, you might want to make some adjustments to this, and I'll show you where. But I made this bunny by accident. I just, we have a Michael's right next door to our store, and I love to knit, but sometimes it's just never going to happen that I knit something. So I like to find alternative ways to use the yarns and stuff. And Michael's isn't my first choice of places to buy knitting supplies, but they have the really cool acrylic furry yarn and things like that. So we're going to start off with this file, and the file is from this company called Lead Studios. And I knew about Lead Studios before I really knew about them because I would always see this place come up with the Korean subtitles, and it would be like awesome embroidery stuff that I'd never really thought of before. And one of the things they were doing was the crochet. And we did a Footloose Friday in January where we did the crocheted macrame.
Oh,
Well, Lead Studio also does all kinds of other type things. I'm going to go ahead and click on their link so you can see their site. So they have like old-fashioned kind of doily type stuff, and it's all fairly easy to stitch out. So this is some of their like granny square looking things. Look at this bag. That's actually not crocheted, it's embroidered. And they're using just a worsted weight yarn in these files. And you can see that's kind of what the stitch out file looks like. And when I was looking around to do that kind of stitching, eventually, as I kept looking at their stuff, I found this little bear. And the little bear, their site isn't very easy to navigate. I'm going to warn you there, but the bear is under boucle. And boucle is really like there's a boucle yarn and there's a boucle fabric. And it's where the fabric kind of is slubby. Like picture Chanel like woven type suit jacket. It's that kind of look. And I'm like, oh, that seems interesting. I think I want to give that a try. And so you can see there's the little, there they are up close. And this doesn't look anything like my bunny, but it is the exact same pattern, except for my bunny, I changed the ears to make them bunny ears. And so that's our file that we're going to work with. So you want to make sure that you purchase the boucle bear size large, and it's only $12. So it's about the same as any other pattern, and it's instant delivery because they do digital downloads. So but they also have cross stitch designs, hardanger, a little faux handmade lace design, and that's just kind of their shtick. They try to make things look as close to handmade stuff as possible. And what we're going to do in this class is I'm going to show you, how to stitch their file, how to alter it if you want to make a bunny, and then some best tips for construction. So what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to show you how to make and adjust your file if you want. And then I'm going to talk you through the prep and stitching out the bear or the bunny. And then by the time we meet next week, I want to have all of the bear or bunny pieces stitched out. You don't have to cut them apart or whatever. I just want them to be actually stitched out. It doesn't take that long. It's just I kind of want to make sure I also talk you through doing it because it takes a certain amount of attention span, and this isn't the project that you leave unattended. And so the best thread or yarn to use with this project is that thicker yarn, fuzzy yarn. We want it to be about 2.5 millimeters in diameter. And the 26L foot that came with your 990, well, we're going to use that instead of the 43 foot because the 26L opening is perfect to hold this particular yarn that I found from Loops and Thread from Michaels. And I'm going to show you all of that over there at the drawing board. If you have couch clips for your number 72 feet, the couch clips openings are too tiny for some of this stuff too. So you want to just use that 26L. And if you've been using the software and you've stumbled around, I think it was if you did Time for 9 with us, it was that Black Work Run class where I talk about the stipple fill as one of the options. And so the stipple fill is really what the Lead Studio has used to fill the bear to do this boucle couching technique. So our supplies is the stabilizer is polymesh. You're going to need some polyfill stuffing to stuff the bear or the bunny. Half a yard of fabric to match your yarn. Your featured thread is the Ceracore thread. I don't know why, but Ceracore thread seems to work really well with this slippery faux fur yarn. And Ceracore is typically what we use in our serger, but it can also be used in the sewing machine. And you want the same thread in the top and bottom. So if I'm using a pink yarn tonight, and I am going to just use a beige Ceracore thread, and it's going to blend fine. And then anytime you do something like this and you're making your own design, or even if you're just testing out, don't be committed to whatever you're trying for the very first time to be the end all be all. You're going to need to practice. So you might count on messing the first one up a little bit. If you don't have that, you can also use the Dritz or the Nifty Notion single thread support to hold your cone of thread.
Okay.
And then sometimes, and it's not as important for this, but oopsie, well, hello. There we go. This little ball here that holds the yarn, this can sometimes be handy too to help feed the yarn out of the bowl while you're stitching. But you're going to see that this is a very interactive project. So while you're doing that bunny, you are not going to leave. You're going to be there holding the yarn the whole time. So when people come by you and they're like, that's cheating using that embroidery machine, you can say, oh, no, it isn't, because I can't take my eyes off this machine right now. Leave me alone. Okay, so this is the cheapest pink fabric I think I have in my stash, but that's okay because I just need to have something similar in color to the yarn that I'm using. I don't need to put any fusible woven on the back or anything. And then this is my 20-inch wide poly mesh stabilizer that we're going to use. And this project is 2 hoopings, the front of the bunny or the bear and the back of the bunny or the bear.
Okay.
So then this is my yarn, and this is I have all kinds of stuff of this, right? This is the loops and threads, and I have a link in your presentation deck. And basically the you can purchase it right from Michaels. I think that you will only see loops and threads at Michaels. I think it's their own brand. So this comes in all different kinds. And I have to tell you, Carla, I bought this here in Chicago, and I knitted something when I was in Florida. And I'm like, crap, I didn't buy enough. So I went to Florida and Michael's, and boom, guess what? I found exactly the same thing. So You can get this. So this proves my theory. You can get this anywhere. And then they even have what I like to call the 1980s or 90s frosted tip version here. So this yarn, when we first see it, you can see that this is way, way, way too thick to feed through any kind of pouching device or whatever. But what you're going to do is you're going to pull about four yards, might be a little bit too much, maybe 4 feet is more like it, but whatever you're comfortable doing. So you're going to just take a little bit of this off. I think this is probably about 6 feet. So I'm going to cut it. And when you cut this stuff, it's fuzzy like actual fur. But see how I can pull the 3 strands apart? That's what we're going to do. We're going to pull this guy apart. So what we're really stitching down is only 1 strand of this 3-strand faux fur yarn. And I'm going to do something goofy here. Hang on. Not that you need to see me do this. It's not a beautiful sight, but foot down on this stuff when I'm by myself doing this. I do recruit Chris to help me with this sometimes, but you just kind of get that far and you're just trying not to knot, and don't try to separate both of them at the same time. Just do one at a time. The first one's the hardest. And then once you separate these into your 3 separate skeins, you're going to kind of roll them up into a neat little ball. And don't worry if you think your piece might not be long enough to make your whole bear. This project is so forgiving because if you run out of the yarn, you can just use your backup function on your 990 and put more yarn through the foot and start again. So there's the Sarah cord, that's the serger thread, and I wound a bobbin before class. And then there's our 26-foot that we're using. Okay, so those are the things that we need. So now, okay, so then let's talk a little bit about altering the file. And I'm going to open our design. So there they are. It's ugly colors, but don't worry about that. And then we're going to pick our hoop. So I'm going to right click on my hoop, and we're going to use the giant hoop because we have B990s. Okay, so you can see that our bear comfortably fits in our giant hoop here. And now if I didn't want to do anything else to this bear and I wanted it to be a bear and not a bunny, then I would just leave this just as is and stitch it out. But if you want to do, go ahead. Okay. But if you wanted to do the bunny, what we have to do, and I want to explain a little bit about this. So if I click on this and you see that stipple stitch there, this is, if I enlarge or reduce this, this will not, it will not keep that same density. So I'm going to just digitize a rectangle here. And I'm going to fill it with my stipple fill. And I'm going to go to object properties, and I'm going to make this go to 1.25. 1.0. Okay. And now I'm going to apply it. Okay, so see how dense that is? And if I make a copy and I enlarge this, it still stays that dense. Well, let's take this arm, for example. Let's make a copy of this arm, and now let's enlarge it. Do you see what's happened here? It makes the stipple bigger. It doesn't keep that proportion.
Why is it not doing that, Gail? Or why isn't it keeping the proportion?
Because the way that this has been digitized and saved,
Ah,
they have made it so that you can't alter it.
ah.
They want it to be exactly the way they designed it. And that's fine. And there's a couple different reasons for that. One, so that you're using their original design and it doesn't get messed with, and people like me mess up with their original design. But also it could be the digitizing software that they have can't make it fully compatible for Bernina. So in the June building blocks lesson, Debbie talked about grades of embroidery designs, grade A, B, and C. Well, if you look down here, grade C, this means that this design is saved as a stitch by stitch design, which doesn't save any of the allocations that something like this might be saved as. So it's no big deal. We all have learned to right click, left click, right? So this is not a complicated design. So first things first, this is the hardest thing I've ever made, and I had to turn. So they want you to, let's just pretend we made this bear this size. They want you to make this bear and then leave a little opening right here and turn the whole thing inside out. I couldn't get my bear's head through that neck opening. So I had to chop the head off my bunny in order to do that. So we have a 990 and we have a giant hoop. So we can make our bear bunny bigger, which will help us to be able to stitch this better, right?
Right.
Okay, that's awesome. So now what we're going to do is I just made this the size of the jumbo hoop, which means that it's actually 11.348 by 15.157. You can make yours whatever size you want. But now I'm going to lock this design. That means that this is just like having a picture in the background. So are we decided, do we want to make a bear or do we want to make a bunny? If you want to make a bunny, then we need to put some ears on the bunny. So I'm going to open. Now, my first set of ears were giant, so I didn't use them on a bunny, but for Easter, I put bunny ears on all of our Berninas at the store.
Oh,
There aren't as many people traipsing through the store as I would like, but I thought it was super cute. So I'm just kind of like, that might be about the right size. Now, another thing that you want to do, because if you're going to alter this in any way, you might want to alter only the front of the bear because, excuse me, if you want to keep their placement of the eyes and the nose, then you'll want to do the front, right? But we can put the eyes wherever we want and we can put the nose wherever we want. So that's why I'm working more with a plain design right here. So with this in mind, and we know that we need two sets of ears of the front and ears of the back, right? So we might need to make this in 4 hoopings, or I'm sorry, 3 hoopings. Front of the bear, back of the bear, front of the ears, back of the ears. So let's just table those ears for a moment. So I'm going to get out of my jumbo hoop view. I'm just going to turn my hoop off here so we can play around. So this is locked and these are not. So what we want to do is go back to our presentation deck just so I can review some of our settings. There's your bunny ears, that the same ears that you see there. And what we're going to do on our bear is our first round, we're going to digitize that blob that you see in red. And then you're going to repeat for the arms. And this is if you're turning your bear into a bunny. So we're going to go to closed object, and let's go ahead and pick red. So if you wanted the biggest bunny possible, you're going to make your bear however proportionate you want, take my ear template, and then kind of figure out how big you think the ears should be, and then make your own ears. But if you want to just use my ears and not digitize your own, then your bear needs to be enlarged to 8.13 by 11.239. And now I'm going to lock this again. Okay, now we're ready to do our closed object and our red. And we're going to just set with a left click, and we're going to go around this blobby kind of shape here like this. And don't worry if it's not exact. This is just nothing that anybody is going to pay attention to at the end. And then we're going to hit enter to set it. And then we're going to do the same thing with the arm. Just make that little kidney bean shape. Then you can select this and do a mirror merge to put the other arm over there. Then we're going to select this, and we're going to turn it into our stipple fill. So you can go up to object properties once this has turned fuchsia. And we're going to go to fill stitch and choose stipple run. And this is where we're going to adjust the density. Oh, and we want it to be 2.5 in length and geez, Gayle. 1.1 inches. So 0.1 and apply. And okay. So now if we look really close at this, you can see that's about the same density as the Lead Studio. So now we have something else we need to do. We need to create the bear outline stitch, because this is where it's going to, we will know where our stitching line is when we go to sew these bits together. So we're going to go back to our digitizing toolbox drawer over here on the left, and we're going to pick closed object. And let's pick something else that's a bright color. Let's do green. And we're going to left click to set. And this is where we have to be a little bit more delicate going around here. We want to go around the feet and these
Now
details
she's digitizing.
that I skipped when I was just adding the boucle technique. Enter. And now I'm going to leave that green fill for right now. Don't care. So now we're going to go over and do the same thing to the arm. And I want symmetric arms. So now we're gonna, if we want to zoom in and make sure we got it as nice as we want it. And if you need to reshape, remember reshape. I think you both did the time for 9. There we go. And now we're going to mirror merge and move this guy over right on top of those stitching lines. And then I do want to take my little red bit, and I'm using the arrows on my keyboard to just nudge that in a little bit. So basically now I'm going to go to color film and I want to select the green. And this time I want this to be a single outline. And there is my bear back. No, my bunny back without ears. Now, I know that you want to use my ears, but you guys can draw your own ears. And I'm going to show you the secret of how I made my ears. I said, a bunny probably needs some big ears. So then I picked purple. So that would show up. I went to digitize, closed object, and I said, what kind of big ears should this bunny have? Let me start here. They probably need to go to a point and then come down somehow, enter. And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to reshape these because I think they're too bunny-like. The bunnies in our yard here at the house, they don't have very big ears. They're not like Bugs Bunny. They're like these little short ears, almost like Bonaparte, my French bulldog. So that's how I made the ear. And then I rotated it so it would be straight up and down like so. And then I made another one. But actually, then I took it. I should have showed you to do mirror, because now that's gonna kind of, if it was angled out a little bit, now they're symmetric, right? And now I can take this guy and also make that stipple fill. Stipple run, 2.5 in stitch length, but 0.1 inches. Perfect. And now the only thing is, we're going to need to create a little, well, we can do a little closed stitching here. But I'm going to let you know a little secret. The ears are not quite formed the same way that our bear is. I took my ears and I put them wrong sides together, and then I just zigzag stitched them together. I didn't try to turn them, so the ears aren't stuffed. And now we're going to mirror merge this. And then probably you're going to want some kind of fill stitch for the inside of the ear. So let's digitize that with our closed object. Oops, I wanted it to be filled in. There we go. That, when you're an artist, you can make any kind of bunny shape insides of your ears that you want, but if you want them to look a little bit more symmetric, you might need to use your reshape tool. Do you want a thin little pink area, or do you want a thick pink area? And now let's mirror merge this. And one of the things I want to do in color film Now that I made this, I want this to be the same color as my inside. I gotta pin this color film. That's driving me nuts. Okay, there we go. So I want all of my stipple to stitch at the same time. I want all of my outline to stitch at the same time. And now I want my pink ears to stitch. So what's something else that I might need to put on here?
The nose.
And the eye placement.
Yeah.
Now I want to warn you about something. We have this store here in Chicagoland area. It's called American Science and Surplus. You can buy anything for 40 cents. And I bought a case of googly eyes for like 40 cents, I swear. But the googly eyes were just a wee bit too big, which also I think caused me to have a hard time turning that head inside out. But little beads for the eyes would be okay. So if you were going to do little beads for eyes or something like that, I kind of look at the bunny after it's made and then I sew the eyes on. So just keep that in mind. But I do want to do the nose. So I'm going to go over to my bunny nose and I'm going to steal the nose from the bear. Easier said than done. There we go. And I'm copying and I'm pasting. And then I'm going to make it a black nose. So this is going to be my bunny front. Now I can unlock my pieces here and I'm going to delete them. I don't need them anymore. This is also where I might have an opportunity to make this larger. Let's just say I'm gonna, have I ever taught you guys what polygon select tool is? This polygon
No.
select tool right here, this guy, allows me to roughly go around weird areas like this. You set it by hitting enter. And now I can move my bunny ears out of the way. And I can select this guy. And I think I need to make this guy bigger, if truth be told. So I'm gonna undo my automatic centering and go to manual centering. I'm gonna move this guy in the middle of my hoop, deselect. Now I'm gonna make him larger. Actually, I want to take note as to how much of a percentage I'm making this bigger. That's 133%. Okay, so now I'm going to take my ears and make them 133%, and I'm going to make sure my proportionate scaling is on. 133. And now enter. Okay, perfect. So now these are in proportion with my bunny. And let's see if there's any way that I can fit these in there. No. So I'm going to stitch my bunny ears separately. So I'm going to copy these, select them. And do you know that right click and drag will make a copy? And then I'm going to delete the pink ears. So now we've got the bunny ears front and the bunny ear back. Select all of these. And we're going to cut, new design, and paste. And we are going to call these bunny ears. Perfect. And now this, because this has a nose, is the front. So now we're going to save this as class bunny front. Okay. Now we have one easy thing to do. We're going to delete the nose. And now we save this as class bunny back. File. Save as. You are ready to stitch. I'm opening class bunny front from my recent designs. And I do, here we go, raised satin. So I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gail,
Yeah.
would you see a lot of difference in the outcome if you used a different foundation fabric?
You don't really, because you are not going to see the fabric very much. You really aren't.
Okay.
This dense stipple is gonna yield
Yep.
you pretty much full coverage. Now, the difference is going to be if you decide that you want your fill to be less dense. So see how close together my stipple is?
Mhm.
If we go to the object properties and we change this, say, to point, let's say 1.9,
Mhm.
this is where you would see a difference. The base fabric would make a difference. Because you're going to have more space between your stitches.
That makes sense.
And you had it on one, right?
Yes. I did at least, I have troubleshot this and done this a few times. So yeah. And this doesn't take a terrible amount of time to stitch out. It's going to feel like it takes 3 hours because you can't leave the machine to stitch this out. So we're going to use my Wi-Fi transfer. It's my #1 most favorite thing. And there's my 990. And I'm going to load it onto my 990. And by the magic, ooh la la, here it goes. Okay. Okay, here we go. So then here's my 26L foot. And here's that yarn. So this is one of my single strands of yarn. If you need like a little thread cradle or something to thread this, I just spit and twist the yarn. That it's going to go down through that hole. There we go. So this is how it's going to go. Now, if you can picture, let's zoom. Okay, so if you can picture the fact that every once in a while you might get a tuft of that fur holding you up, this is why you need constant vigilance. You're going to stop. Remember your start-stop button, the button that starts your machine, stops the machine. And you take your little sharp scissors and you trim that so that it'll always go freely through, like so. And so in your stitch out summary, we can cut. It's not a big deal. So you don't have to turn your quilt settings on, but you do want thread away to be off. And we want our thread color changes to be multicolor. and no basting. Turn the thread cutting to on color changes, on thread change. We don't need it to do anything else. And now I'm going to say, okay. It's going to tell me, Gayle, you need to put your hoop on. And one of the things in my excitement I forgot was to change my, it was to change the stitch order so that all the stipple stitches at the same time. So let me show you something cool, if I can. Let's see here. I want to go into my little stitch buttons here, my thread changes, and I want to sequence so that all the red stitches, all the green, all the pink. I told you wrong in the beginning. We want to do, instead of doing multicolor, you want to pick the thread sequencing, or the, what do they call that? Let's go back to the summary. Reduce thread changes. You want to select that under this right here. Reduce thread changes. Initially, I had you pick multicolor, but we want reduce thread changes. Okay, so let's take a little evaluation here. Normally, I like turbo boost mode, but we're gonna slide that little guy to about halfway right now. And then I've got little snippies. These are not my normal little snippies, but these are just little thread snips. These are the OESD ones. And I have this because I can get in there and cut my little furry yarns when they get out of control. So I'm going to pull this back to about here. And I like to keep my yarn kind of to the left side of the machine there, like so. And yeah, we're going to start. So press and hold the start button, and you just let it do its thing. You're just here to make sure it doesn't get tangled. And one thing I want to do is stop and just get rid of our little tail that we started with. And you want to make sure that this has enough slack. You don't want it to get tight or anything. Now, at the speed that we're going, this is going to be about an hour's worth of stitching out. And to the question that we had earlier about what fabric versus the yarn, I wouldn't use black fabric with the pink yarn. It's going to look a little bit weird, but you're going to just try to match the fabric as well as you can. If you have one of those yarns that is the 90s frosted tips, then you could maybe pick the root color for some texture. But at the end of the day, don't let me stifle your creativity. You know, if you want black fabric and pink yarn, please don't let me stop you. And lastly, do we need to use the fake fur yarn for this project? No, you can use worsted weight. You can use anything that fits through that 26 foot if you want. It's just that this is what creates something where you give it to your friends and you're like, I embroidered this bear. They're going to be like, what? So one thing is, while we're stitching, if we were to get a knot, if we were to have a snafu of some kind, you just stop it, you trim, you re-thread your yarn if you need to through the foot, and you start just like we started before, and then you trim off the tail. Because as you can see, it looks kind of messy what we're doing now. So when we're done, or if we have to like start over in a spot or whatever, nobody is going to be able to tell. I'm going to go ahead and stop it just because you guys don't need to. I mean, unless for your ASMR, you could sit here and watch that stitch, um, but that's as easy as it is. So then once the bunny ears stitch, then what you might consider doing is putting a layer of stitch 2O on top of the work so that when you stitch your ears inside, it will sit nicely on top of the yarn and not get lost in the yarn. And also it will help protect the foot from getting stuck under any straggling little pieces of fur.
Okay.
And so I can't stress enough to you, do not walk away while that is stitching. You noticed I stopped my machine to come over here. That is going to be called a 990 buster if you walk away. And then, so this is what mine looked like when I had it all in the hoop. So you're going to stitch bare your bunny parts. You, just like you saw me do just now, you're hooping up one layer of poly mesh in the giant hoop. And then you also, I floated my piece here, but I think it's best practice to put your fabric and your stabilizer and hoop that up all together. And then your stipple is going to be Ceracore. Your outline stitch, you might want to change to a contrasting color for the bobbin so that you can see it when you ultimately stitch the item together. But then once you're onto your ears and your nose, you want pink thread for the ears. You can leave that Ceracore in the bobbin, but then you want the black thread for the nose, and then you're going to hoop the other hoop. Do you think I told you something wrong about the bunny back? Here's our bunny front, and here's our bunny back. I'm going to select my bunny back, select all, and mirror it. See how it's not totally symmetric?
Yeah.
So we want to mirror it, and then you can save it. That's going to be a little bit easier for you to stitch together that way.
Yeah.
All right, class 2. Let me explain. So class 2, we have already stitched out our bunny and all of those good things, and now we are ready for assembly. So once your cute little bunny or bear is all stitched out, it's time to remove it from the hoop. So you're just going to simply take it from the hoop, and remember, I talked about changing your bobbin thread. Ha ha ha, forgot to do it right here, but changing the bobbin thread to something contrasting. And really, we only need it on one of your pieces because this is going to be your sewing line. You're going to sew just on the inside of this piece. So let's take this out of the hoop and cut. And of course, it's easier to turn it upside down to do this. And we're not going to cut on the line. Remember, that line is the sewing line. So we want to cut about 1/4 of an inch away from this line. And don't worry about going over every curve. You'll also remember from class 1 that we mirrored our front of our little critter and the back of our critter so that they'll fit together nicely because this is not a symmetric design. Don't forget, we still have arms on there. And now we're going to trim where the feet are. And this is going to be messy, so have a little vacuum cleaner on hand. Okay, perfect. So here's our little guys here. So we're going to take this piece and place it right on top of this piece, like so. And my other piece, you can see I didn't change my bobbin there. So I'm just going to go by what's here, right? And so we're going to pin around here, but I also want to show you I am using a Sharpie, and that's because there's no way it's going to bleed or you're going to see through, but my tired old eyes need it. So we're also going to need to sort of mark where we want to put these ears. And so this one we're going to stitch, and then you're also going to need a little space to turn. Now remember in class 1, I made my bunny as large as possible for our giant hoop, and then I stitched the ears in a separate hooping. Well, this way, I think we're going to have the best of both worlds. We're going to be able to turn this bunny or bear without cutting the head off and then hand sewing around the neck. I know that sounds really brutal, right? But then we are going to have our arm pieces, and we have other arm pieces from another hooping. So we're just going to lay, come on, Gayle, get yourself together here. We're just going to lay these pieces down like so. And then we're going to also leave an opening on each one of these arms for turning. And we will have to sew those by hand, but it's really easy and you don't have to have beautiful stitches because the stitches are very hidden in there. So before we start constructing anything at the machine, let's talk about the ears. So here I have a front and back of our ear. And what I like to do with the ears is I'm going to cut right on that travel stitch that was made. If anything, maybe just a 1/16 of an inch away from it. So you're cutting these perfectly because our ears are not going to be stitched and flipped, and they are not going to be sewn together with batting or wadding or stuffing. So they look very pretty and raw edged like this. So we're going to take the same thing to do to the back of our ear. Now, there have been some people recommending that we put some wire in the ears to give them some shape. I don't really want to do that, not because I don't think it's a good idea or it could be a fun idea. I just don't want to have wire poking through on them. So I'm going to leave mine floppy. But if you are going to put wire in, I would recommend couching over it like a 22 gauge wire. Okay, so now these go together like this. And when you're cutting them, you know, if you get them and they're not quite lining up the way you want, you can trim one to match the other. I'm sure that if you looked at bunnies in the wild, you would find that their ears aren't perfectly symmetric, don't you think? Otherwise, you know, they'd be going to like show bunny status. Okay, so there's our ears. So step 1, before we sew any of this together, we're going to do a little zigzag on the edges of our ears to hold them together.
I'm working with a 80 microtex needle and the Ceracore thread in the top and bottom, just like the thread that I used for stippling. And here is one of my ears, and I want to do just a little zigzag, and I have my machine set for a number 2 zigzag stitch with all the default settings. And you'll notice that I'm using a number 34. If you are using a 990 or another machine, you're going to be using your 34C for this. And I'm just going off the edge, lining both of these little bunny ears up together. And the line, the red line of my clear foot is on the edge of the bunny ear. Then we're just going to simply sew with the needle landing on the other side, turn around, and go back down this way. Okay, there's one side and the other side. Now, this isn't finished yet. This is just our preliminary stitch to get our bunny ear down. We've got another set of ears here, or an ear set. So now that we have both of our ears put into position here, you can see they're not as floppy. I think they're cool. They can still be molded. We don't need that wire in there. But we're gonna take some scraps of our strands that we separated of the yarn, and we're gonna go around our bunny ear. And we're gonna try to just, I try to keep this kind of on top of the ear like so. And if you wanted, you could do a zigzag or a straight stitch for this. If we do a straight stitch, we're gonna get a furrier ear side. So let's get everything under there. Okay, see, that goes pretty quickly, but we also can kind of cover that edge, and we're going to go along the back side as well. And if you miss some loops along the way, we can go ahead and cut, lift. Yeah, see, that didn't quite get stuck there. So that's why I need to kind of think about moving it over, or rather, maybe we could have done the zigzag all along, which is also fine. Here we go. I'll just show you the difference there. You do want to make sure that you're pushing your little fuzzy wuzzies to the side there so they'll fluff out. There we go. Now we can see, you can see the zigzaggies a little bit, but that looks good. So let's turn it over and let's come back down the other side of the bunny ear and just go back down through that little section. And we're just making sure that we get everything stitched down. But this exercise is really a confidence booster because, you know what, zigzag or straight stitch, you can barely see those stitches after we fluff everything out with our fingernails or a little toothbrush or something like that. Don't use the toothbrush that you use to brush your teeth though, because you're just going to get a lot of fuzz in your mouth.
So we have our ears here, and I have yet to sew my little bunny together yet. So we're going to start with the body, and I'm going to stitch along all of those markings. So we're going to start here, right? But then I have, come on, lay down flat, little guy. Okay, so we're going to start here, and then I just want to transfer my ear markings to like here. And we just want to check the base in comparison. So I think I'm going to widen the space for my ears here. So, okay, so let's go over to the machine and stitch this.
So I'm using the same foot because it's clear and I can see where I'm stitching, because I'm going to stitch on this black line or just to the left of it there. And I'm going to take my straight stitch and just make a 1.85 millimeter stitch length.
That's going to be a very, very tight stitch. Now, you may be wondering, Gail, what about our little googly eyes for 20 cents? I probably should have put those on before I sewed it together, but you're going to learn by my mistake, right? But I want my eyes about here, like so, and I'm going to feed my fingers through the bunny that I've stitched just to make sure that I'm separating this because I need to cut a little X where the eyes go to make room for the shaft of that like googly eye. So now let's open our very expensive eyeballs here. And you can see what they look like. So let's slip one through. I might go off camera here for a second because this is not easy. Okay, I can kind of go through the ear hole. Okay, so let's find the point of the eye and get that through my bunny. There we go. I did it. And now we want to push this through with all of our might. There we go. Perfect. There we go. That looks beautiful. Okay. Come on now. There we go. These are not easy. Here we go. Perfect. Now we're going to turn it inside out. Make sure that you have sharp scissors to clip your little areas here where there's a point. Or else it's not going to turn flat. Right, so now let's work on the head. Okay, so now we're just going to take some time to finesse this, get all the bits turned, get all of our feet turned out properly. Okay, so now the best plan for this guy, before he's stuffed, we're turning our seam allowances in, and we're going to kind of decide which ears are which, and we're going to put his little ears on like that, and we're going to stitch just a zigzag stitch along here. So I'm going to do this ear, and then I'll do the other ear. Right, we have a bunny with no arms. So we're going to stitch these guys. And we're going to start at one dot, stop at the other, and then we'll have two kidney bean shaped pieces that will then make our little cuts so they lay flat and turn it inside out. Okay, so now we're just going to trim those little cuts so it will turn easily. And now we're going to turn them. It does still require a little bit of wrestling. Okay. Ta-da! So now we're going to take our polyfill and we're going to stuff the stuffins into the bunny. This might take a while. Go talk amongst yourselves. Okay, so now it's time to do some hand sewing. So I'm going to take some of my Sarah core thread, and then I'm going to, threading this on camera is going to be funny. You don't want your thread to be too long, so I'm going to cut it here. And it is double-stranded. And I'm going to knot. And I'll start with our little body here. And I just need to sew this little guy up. And I'm doing like a ladder stitch. You don't really see these stitches because of how furry it is. Poke the stuffings in. Okay. So now we're going to tie this off. And then we're going to stitch the same type of stitch to hold the stuffing in the arms. And then we're going to use a stitch to hold the arms onto the bunny. All right. Well, the ears are a little big. I'm not going to deny it, right? But pretty gosh darn cute nonetheless. So here we go. Cute, cute.
All right, well, now that you've completed part 2, you are completely schooled on all things creative and couching and that. Now, what we didn't cover in this video, but we made a video of, is our mixed media using the Bernina punch tool. And so just click the link in our presentation deck that I send you when you sign up for the Bernina software Building Blocks Volume 2 with us at Bernina of Naperville. And each month I send you out the little presentation deck, and that presentation deck contains a link to many other videos that you might find helpful for these techniques. So until then, I would like to thank you for watching. We'll see you next December 15th for another video and another topic. And yeah, and in the meantime, if you could just hop on over to our Bernina of Naperville YouTube channel. It's easy to find. It's youtube.com/Bernina of Naperville, where you can like, comment, and subscribe. All right, now you've got a lot of work to do. See ya.